Good day, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, wherever you are in the world. Thank you so much, especially to Tristan and Jacob for taking the initiative of gathering us social capital people all over the world. And it's always good to be talking to people who actually understand what what we're talking about. Yeah,
Yeah.
right. So I'll get straight to the nitty gritty of things. Hopefully everybody can see the slides. Do let us know if you can't. So as Tristan mentioned, I am actually running a company that focuses on social capital, but we call it capital data analytics now because we've taken it a step further. And I'll spend perhaps 2 or 3 minutes explaining how that came about. And a lot of our clients looked at change management and initiatives and try to figure out, especially why their initiatives fail or it does not achieve the outcome that they were looking for. So just a bit about myself. I was a PhD student at the University of Queensland when I delved into not social capital per se, or rather I got into social capital almost by accident. I was looking at social network analysis. Then I realized that the elements I was looking at was really the elements of social capital as defined by Nahapiat and Ghoshal. So these are the elements. So Nahapiat and Ghoshal mentioned about the relational, cognitive, and structural elements. So this is slightly different than the other more popular definitions by Putnam, by Bordeaux, and the other researchers. Why do we actually use this particular approach? For a lot of organizations, these make a lot more sense to them internally. Yes, if you're talking perhaps in bigger organizations or bigger, even geographical areas like counties and what have you, then perhaps the other definitions make sense. There's the social capital index and a few other concepts that we can actually look at that uses different definitions. But getting back to organizations, this makes sense to them because they could understand the relational elements between people. They could understand the technical skill sets, the cognitive elements that exist within their human capital. And they also understand, but a nuanced understanding that the know who, the structural elements, play a role, but they did not have a way of measuring these elements together. So that's why the Harpit and Goshal's definition makes a lot more sense to a lot of organizations. So there we go. But as we have discussed in previous sessions and in the written communique, it is a challenge to identify what matters in a particular scenario. And that in itself is a very important driver to which model that we select. So, so I'm getting. I guess in this sense, I've actually put the horse before the cart. Should have went there first. But in a sense, I hope that this explains why it's critical to understand the scenario that you're targeting, especially if you're doing consulting work or trying to actually come up with proper interventions for clients whose staff's careers are on the line. So moving on from there, the definition of that was defined by Nahapiat and Ghoshal. We take it a bit further, but just quickly, these are some of the things that a lot of clients look at when we mention social capital. Just a segue, in Malaysia, the people don't understand social capital. They understand the phrase cableability. Cable, not capability, but cableability, because cables brings to mind connections between people. And the saying goes, hey, if somebody has a lot of social capital, that person has a lot of cables. Of course, you don't know whether those cables are good or bad because those cables could be supporting something that's detrimental to the organization. And that is why selecting the right social capital definition is critical towards coming up with the right interventions or coming up with the right analysis of the scenario. So what we do is capture the personalities, psychometric scores of the people within an organization, the social metrics, the items that drives the company culture, and we actually map that onto the networks, the know who, the structural elements that we've captured, and then we carry out social data analytics, or rather social capital data analytics on this combination of data. So what do we end up with? I mean, if you have any questions about the exact methodology, we can delve into that in a bit. But let me go straight to the results from this particular analytics to give you an illustration. So we have change management. So let me just take you to the slides there. This was a client of ours who CEO got very fed up because they tried a lot of change initiatives and they used the head of departments thinking that those were the change agents or given those who were assigned the role of change agents. Unfortunately, it has not worked. And of course, the CEO can't fire all of the head of departments. So what the person decided to do was take a look at a data-driven approach. So we came in to, and during our analysis, we found that trust elements was the most important driver of the network formation that matters in the organization. So trust became the most important dimension. Of course, there were a few others, but we looked at trust as one of the main filter of social capital within the organization. So from there, this is our first output. We identified the backbone networks within the organization. Every rounded square that you see here, let me zoom in, designates a particular person within the organization. Every arrow that you see here designates who talks to who to actually get jobs done or resources to actually get jobs done, as well as advice. Now, they are all red because these are the high trust networks within the organization. So high trust networks are quite different than just normal trust networks. Because back in the 50s, George Simmel had actually defined the concept behind such high trust networks. And we use this as a way to map the high trust networks, the backbone network, so to speak, to the client. It's and by doing so, we could actually help the organization identify clusters. There's a cluster here. Let's see whether I could actually highlight this. There's a cluster here. On the top left corner, there's another cluster here. And the cluster here could barely make out that particular cluster. Yes, and of course, they are disconnected people. It doesn't mean that they are useless. It does mean that they're not really within the deep connectivity of the organization. They could be menial workers, menial staff, and that can be done by HR afterwards. We need to actually give them an idea who are the people that has distinct characteristics that the CEO was looking for. So moving on. And we took a look at the coordination networks as well, because we couldn't just sideline or consider those who are disconnected to be, again, as I said earlier, useless. Yes. Pardon me for using such a very brusque word, because usually in industry, they are very straightforward and to the point. So by doing so, we could actually highlight further those who really play a role in executing activities, hence the coordination networks. Now, I mentioned trust to be the most important element. There were others. There were other psychometric elements that were found to be significant. For example, like self-monitoring, proactivity, and interestingly enough, an archaic form of proactivity, which was locus of control. And so we actually had to include that in the weightage of these arrows. So if certain arrows did not represent high, or rather did not represent high levels of connectivity between people driven by those elements, like locus of control and what have you, we left out those arrows. So that way we could actually tell the CEO, right, now we can map out those with the highest value of social capital within your organization. And we can depict those by changing the sizes of the icons representing the people. So you see some people, you can actually see those with large sized icons. And these sizes actually are scaled from their social capital value, which in itself is a combination of trust and the other statistically significant elements. So by that virtue, we could actually tell the CEO, right, these are the people who who have a certain weight or certain social capital within your organization. And if you want to actually get change initiatives running throughout your organization, these are the people you should rely upon, not necessarily the head of department. Yes, because at times what we found was that the head of departments, well, are important in the reporting channels or chain of command, but not so important in terms of actually reinforcing change initiatives. Because if you think about it, change means risk. Risk means in order to manage those, you need a level of trust. And hence, it makes sense from a theoretical perspective. You need trust in order to manage the risks that comes with change. So based on based on those findings, these were some of our findings and findings and recommendations. Sorry, try and have to pacify my cat for a bit. Okay, there we go. It's calmed down a bit. So in the networks, we found which of the companies, oh, before I forget, the colors, I forgot to actually explain the colors. There were three companies within this group of companies. Some of the red company was strongly connected, the blue not so much, and yellow was quite poor. But interestingly enough, the yellow company, the yellow division is actually the high value add business unit. That's where the margins are. So because of that, we now have a clear picture what's happening within the trust networks, the backbone networks inside the organization. We know who are the loudspeakers. So in order to help explain to the people, communicate to the staff what we are doing, uh, we actually use the label loudspeakers for those with the highest value of social capital within the organization. On top of that, we also found those who were disconnected. And by virtue of them being disconnected, their value of social capital was relatively low. So we could actually advise the human resource to focus on these disconnected staff. Because, hey, from the industry's perspective, from the company's perspective, we've paid salaries to these people. If we've paid salaries, we need to actually identify whether these are lost resources. Why are they disconnected? Yes. Is it still worthwhile keeping them on? So on and so forth. Of course, on top of that, we recommended that the 22 disconnect staff were reconnected to the organization through the loudspeakers. So they have an additional role on top of just reinforcing change initiatives. And these are the results after the assignment of 14 high social capital staff into the role of loudspeakers. Yes. So about a couple of months after the initiative, we found, sorry, let me rephrase that. So after these interventions were carried out by the organization, they carried out three change initiatives. And out of the three change initiatives, two were deemed highly successful, one moderate, as opposed to prior to that, they had run five change initiatives, none were deemed successful. And the business units or the company's quarter one to quarter two performance improved by 10%. And in quarter three, they expected a similar uptrend. And they were actually making savings of it's about 30,000 ringgit. So that's about 8,000 US dollars a month in terms of salaries. So on top of improved returns, they were also making savings from salaries. And the return of investment on our particular consulting was expected within 3 months. I just added another note there. G30, who's relatively important, this person actually passed away. So even though this person was important relatively, there's nothing we can do about that. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is a snapshot of one of the projects we've carried out, where we use social capital, the Harpiat and Goshil's definition of social capital, to help a company manage the change initiatives towards successful operational excellence improvement. And I think that's 15 minutes. Hopefully that gives everybody an idea how we can actually use social capital for the industry. Thank you very much. And back to you then. Let me just stop sharing the screen. Back to you then, Tristan.
All right, thanks very much for that presentation, Rahmat.